Hi there, this is Lisa Starr with the StarrCast Podcast. I'm happy to see you again and bring with you a guest from Oz. Finally, we're getting someone from the land down under. I'm happy to welcome Craig Mitchell. He's the CEO of Peninsula Hot Springs, and he's joining us from the area today. You can see from his backdrop that what it would look like if he was actually there. So welcome, Craig.
Good evening to you. Good morning from Australia.
Exactly. Good day, mate. Right. I was
Yeah.
thinking about when we met, and I guess we spent like a jet lagged day hanging out in hot springs in the Guangzhou suburbs in China. That was so much fun.
That was good. Yeah, it was a good way to kick off the jet lag, get acclimated, relax. Yeah, it was great.
Well, Peninsula has been well known throughout the world, of course, and Charles is a driving force. But I enjoyed meeting you, and I thought it would be really fun to hear from your perspective because as I learned about your background, I thought, boy, that's really varied. You didn't come up through the typical hot springs or spa management route. So, Craig, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Melbourne, in the suburbs of Melbourne, about 15 miles from the centre of Melbourne. My parents emigrated to Australia from Scotland in the 60s for a better life. They chose Melbourne, which is warmer than Scotland, but not exactly Australia's. It's not Australia's warmest state, shall we say? So I grew up here, but I spent some time in Scotland when I was young, for a year or so, and then in my sort of 20s, I spent some time in the US. I lived in Boulder, Colorado for a while, and then in my 30s, I lived in Chicago for a year or so.
Wow, what brought you to Boulder? Were you training for the Olympics or something? What was going on?
Yeah, and I had some aspirations of, I did triathlon, so I did long course triathlon, the Ironman, and I did the Hawaii Ironman in '93. I met some wonderful people from the US who lived in Boulder, and they invited me across to train. So I trained there in '94. Had a great time. So yeah, it was that.
So you were a triathlete, is that what you said?
Yeah. So I wasn't very good, but I could just go all day at the same pace and managed to fulfill my dream to, I guess, just explore my upper limits. And yeah, I did the Ironman in Hawaii in '93 and '94. So yeah.
Wow. How is doing an Ironman? I mean, I can't even comprehend that.
Yeah. Well, it's just, I mean, I think the thing is that it's little steps that lead up to the long execution of the big event. So you break down the swim into components and you build up to it. The same with the ride, the same with the run, and then you just put it all together. But it's really a mental and physical challenge, and you've just got to get your nutrition right, and you've got to rest, and there's lots of factors, and you learn a lot about yourself along the way. It's really a great experience, but it does absorb your life, and a lot of other things get put on hold while you focus on it. So it's a fairly selfish activity, but it is enriching, and I met a lot of great people doing it. And
So did you hope that you could be a professional athlete? Was that sort of in the back of your mind?
Well, I worked at Ernst & Young, and it wasn't really doing it for me. That was my first role out of university. And I fell in love with triathlon, and what I really loved about it was that you could set the goal, you could work hard, and you got results for your effort. And so I had my corporate career, which I wasn't really enjoying, and I had this, which I really loved, but I wasn't really that talented. So I just got the best out of myself. And so I basically took a year of absence, or took 2 years of absence from my career in a sense. I got a guy to sponsor me. That was an interesting experience in recruitment. Mm-hmm. And then I just pursued it as a semi-professional. So I didn't make a lot of money, but I made I got a little bit of sponsorship, and I made a little bit of money here and there to pay my way. But it really, I wasn't really professional. I was just having a gap year or two.
So what happened after the gap years and you had this experience in the US? What happened next?
So then what I realized is, life's too short. I think I was a bit like a millennial before the term existed. I really, my work really wasn't about wanted it to enrich me. I wanted it to be something that fulfilled me and I got enjoyment from. So while I was doing my triathlons and sort of suspending my career, I thought if I can come back and do stuff that gives me variety, gives me intellectual challenge, and I can make a difference, then that'd be great. So I got into management consulting. I had a range of different options when I got back because my story was pretty good. I'd worked for 3 years at Ernst & Young. I went away for 2 years. I did some other things. Okay, I didn't win the Hawaii Ironman, but I pursued my dream, and that was a good story. So I went to Arthur Andersen, which was one of the best six at the time. Still hold that in really high regard, despite what happened to it. And I worked with some really good people, and I did some really good things in industries that were less than interesting to me. So I did work for gas companies, glass companies, prisons, utilities.
Wow.
And the work itself I actually liked, but the industries I couldn't get excited about them.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember being out at the glass manufacturer, really interested in the problem that we were trying to solve, but the fact that they were making glass, just I couldn't get excited about it. And so I thought, I did that for about nearly 3 years, and I thought if I could merge that type of work with an industry I was passionate about, then I'll be home. So I thought I'll do an MBA, and I'll do an MBA in sport. If I can combine sport with consulting, then away I go, and that's what I did.
Right, that's what you did. And so
yeah,
when
so
you
I took
came
another.
out, go ahead.
I took another gap year to do my MBA. Like I then had a good job. I lived in a good, lived in the city. Had a nice life, but I wasn't really enjoying it. So then I went home, went back to live with my parents. Girlfriend broke up with me. Didn't have any income.
Wonder why.
And I was studying, and I was like 27. And I had the best at that point. That was my second best year, apart from being in Boulder. That was awesome. I didn't have any money, but I was loving my life.
So you get your MBA in sports management, and then I guess the next thing is to look for work in sports management.
Yeah, which is not that easy to do because the people interested in working in sports management exceed the number of roles, and I had some expectations about how senior the role that I would have would be.
You thought your consulting experience you already had might help you, I'm sure.
Well, I just thought, I'm ambitious, I'm smart, I've got a lot of hunger, I want to go in, I want to go and run a business. I was 27. And,
I want to be the president.
Exactly, yeah. And I had an option to go back to Arthur Andersen, and I nearly did, but I decided not to. And long story, but in my MBA, I did a lot of networking. And I went and did this interview with this guy that ran a business in sport management, and he knew me from my sport. Actually, he was an Olympian, and we knew each other through mutual friends and stuff. And so I interviewed him for this piece, and then I submitted the piece. I got a good result. I sent it to him with my resume and said, "Look, here's the outcome of the work that we did together. That interview that I did, and here's my resume. If there's anything that's going, let me know." And he contacted me straight away, said, "We need someone like you with your strategic skills, come in." And so then I worked with them for 3 years.
What kind of work was it?
Well, it was athlete management, but it was the beginning of Australia's preeminent sports management business.
And so like an agent for athletes.
Yeah, but they had other facets of the business as well. So they had events, and they had merchandising and licensing. It was a full kind of suite IMG style model run by two guys that had been good athletes. Rob Woodhouse was an Olympic bronze medalist in the LA Olympics, and Craig Kelly was a premiership player in our football code called AFL. So they built that business from nothing together. And my role at the time, which was a weird title, but now you see it everywhere, this was in about 97, was strategic development manager. And I really wanted the term strategic in my role when I was wrapped together. And I helped them build the business. I helped do strategic planning for them in-house, and their financial system and their people system. I did a lot of really good stuff, but I wanted to be the general manager. I wanted to run it for them. And they said,
Sure.
we're a couple of years older than you. We own it. We run it. You do what we want you to do. And
Right.
I then went and did something else. I went back to consulting actually, and that's what took me to Chicago.
I see. Okay. So you put your sort of foot in the water of combining the operations and the sports that you loved, and
Yeah.
took that break in Chicago. And what happened next?
Yeah, well, in Chicago, I worked with a friend of mine from college or from university who had an IT business, IT consulting business. And I'm not really IT, but I could do the business requirement stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the plan was to help him build the business in Chicago, then bring it back to Australia, which we did. We did grow the business. He had Ameritech as his major client, and we did some other work with some software. And so I learned some other skills. So along the way, I think the whole kind of thing is that without a kind of linear path to where you're going, it's good to have a go. At that point, I wasn't married. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't really have any commitments. Still in my early 30s, and I was free, so I could take a risk. So I went, and that was a kind of business equity thing. Like I wanted to build a business with him and bring it back to Australia.
Sure, have some ownership.
Yeah, and it didn't pan out as I thought it would. Again, I had a great time. I met some wonderful people who are still friends of mine today from the US. I flew over for their weddings. They flew over for mine. Life-enriching experience for sure, and I learned some other great skills. But when I came back to Australia, it was the Olympics, and I had to kind of dust myself off and find a new path, which again was in consulting for a period. And then I kind of I went to another consulting firm, but then I had a few missteps along the way, but I managed to get into a environmental business, which again was close to my heart in terms of, I was thinking about maybe it's not sport, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's something to do with health and wellness. And this business was a great business that procured or produced food packaging, sold it to a client, and then took the packaging back and recycled it. And
that's interesting.
That concept is closed loop. So the major client was Qantas Airlines, where we sold the food packaging. They put it on the plane. It was cardboard boxes. They used it, and then we took it out, recycled it, made another cardboard box, and sent it back to them. So we did that with cutlery and crockery and a whole host of different things, both in airlines, in the healthcare sector, hospitals, and in the quick service food.
Well, that's a good place to be. They all have a constant need, except for in years of pandemic, the airlines wasn't so good. So,
No.
when did you end up back at E&Y?
Well, the story. Well, I went back there in 2015, but to get there, there's two more steps.
Okay.
So I was loving working at Closed Loop, and that was a great business, great entrepreneurial grounding. The owner, still a great friend of mine, entrepreneur. While I was doing it, this other business, other sports management business, was just coming together, and they needed a review. So I went and did a review on the side, sort of on the side. And put together a plan for them. And the plan involved having a CEO. So when I finished the plan, they said, would you consider coming and running it?
And you said, me? You thought of me?
Yeah. I said, yeah, that'd be good. So again, I took another risk because the business I was in, Closed Loop, was a very, very successful business, profitable, and it was a good business. So I went back into sport. So my passion was there. Anyway, did that for 3 years. Again, that did not go as I hoped it would. We grew the business, but what happened was I spun out my own consulting business in sport, and I ran that business for 5 years very successfully with a lot of sports clients. And through that process, I merged my business into Ernst & Young. So I went back 20 years after I had left, or more, 25 years. And so I worked in a great practice within EY, the sports events and venues practice. And I did the same sort of strategic consulting in the sports sector and loved it. But what it gave me an opportunity to do was other work outside sports. So I did work in tourism, and I did work in events and some other pieces. So I did some tourism work. And as a result of that, and that's how we get to the hot springs, my colleague said the Peninsula Hot Springs require a strategic plan. And I was focused on another sports client opportunity. I said, I'm focused on this other opportunity. Can you find someone else to do it? And my colleague said, no, you're perfect for it. And I said, I don't. I'm focused on this other thing, which is big. He said, this is going to work. So on the Friday afternoon, I said, yep, I'll go. I'll come to the pitch on Monday morning. I said, send me the brief. I read the brief on Sunday night, 10 o'clock before I went to bed. I'm looking at the business. I'm thinking, wow, this is completely aligned with my whole value set. It's completely aligned with my skill set.
Wow.
This business is, and then when I subsequently peeled it back, sport was important to me, but it's really about healthy living.
You realized what was behind the sport.
Yeah, exactly. So my whole life I've been exercising, trying to eat well, trying to be balanced, got into meditation when I was in my 20s, got into yoga when I was in my 30s, properly, not just dabble. I like throw myself into stuff and get to the kind of, 80% competency pretty quickly. And then getting from 80% to 100% I'm not that good at, but getting to 80% I'm pretty
be in that.
Yeah. So I read the brief. I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. I looked through the business stuff and on the website.
Thank goodness for your colleague who pushed it on you, right?
Yeah, I was really grateful. But I had been to the hot springs and I bought vouchers for my parents and stuff, but I had never really understood the background to it all in the depth that I subsequently did. So I'm driving down and my colleague's saying, what are you going to say to them? How are we going to approach this? Because I just looked at the brief the night before. So I wasn't exactly well prepared. And I said, it's okay. I think I've got this under control. I think I know how to approach this, because I'd worked with people like Charles at Closed Loop, and I've been on the board of a not-for-profit, and I've worked with the founder, and I knew about wellness, and I could tell that the business wasn't just about making money. It was about expanding for the community and providing this great gift of relaxation. And my colleagues was looking at me like, who knows how this is going to go. So we drive in and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Go to the boardroom. It's the only time I've ever worn a suit to the hot springs. And I just basically tell them a story about what I've done in my career and why I do what I do. And I only do things I'm passionate about, care about. And then it really went like fast forward. Within 10 days, I had the contract to do the consulting brief. That was in sort of May 2018, and then in September 2018, I finished the project, ran a retreat for the board and the senior management team. And when I finished that, the two owners, Charles Davidson and Brad Mitra, asked me if I'd come and implement the plan.
And you said?
I said, well, I'd sort of learned a lot along the way in terms of being hasty about jumping into things. So we went through back and forth a few things that were important. And the big one, which I learned probably the hard way, is the way that you enter is important in terms of then your effectiveness once you're in there. And so we sort of went back and forth on that in terms of, I think working with entrepreneurs is really challenging, but really when they see you in that kind of master-servant relationship, it really isn't effective. You need to be, and I said this to them when I agreed to do the consulting piece, I said, you really need to go in as a peer. They own the business, but engaging me as a consultant, you really need to work together. And if you don't, then what often happens is you just say, well, that was the consultant's view. I don't really agree with the
blame the consultant. I know all about that.
That's it. And you don't do it. And fortunately, I had a great case study where I helped a football club and I gave them some advice, did a review of their whole department. And I did it as a partnership with the CEO, and they implemented every one of the recommendations. And they went from, say, I can't remember, they were 15th on the ladder out of 18 or something. And the next year they won it's like the equivalent to the Super Bowl.
That's
the next
so
year
wonderful.
they won it. And so I had this kind of, and this was just the year before I came to the hot springs. And so I'd said to them, "Oh, there it is in action. I've got a live case study where I did work with a client. We did it together. The client owned it as much as I did it with them. And then they implemented it and it was successful. And that's the best way to go."
Exactly.
So when I went in as the consultant, I said, "We have to be peers." And so then when I was being offered this role, I said, irrespective of who owns what, if you want me to do this job, you need to work with me, not do what I tell you to do, but work with me together collectively. And I don't want to be told what to do. So it has to be a meeting of complementary skills.
You're coming in as an equal, and that was smart of you.
Yeah, but that took that took 30 years of missteps. So
sure. Well, we're supposed to learn something from our journey, right?
Yeah.
We get a little smarter as we go. So this is the first time it sounds like that you worked in a business where you have customers, live customers. Tell us what it's like to manage a hot springs business outside of the pandemic. Never mind that issue.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the best part about this, for me, is to see the smiles on the people's faces who are firstly, as they're coming in, because they're anticipating, a great experience. Then to see them in the venue, experiencing it and being relaxed and really connecting with one another and with nature. So there's a lot of it's an intangible remuneration, if you like, where you feel blessed that you can offer something to other people. And then when you see them leaving and they're just in a state of bliss and happiness, it's really heartwarming and great. So it's good.
Tell the listeners a little bit about PHS. I'm sure not everyone knows the scope of it.
Yeah, so we've been going for 16 years. It's a 43-acre site, and we have a number of different aspects to our business, but it's grounded primarily in thermal mineral springs bathing. So the water is extracted from the ground 637 metres, and we have about 50 different bathing experiences in our mineral waters. So the waters are rich in a whole range of different minerals, potassium, boron, and magnesium, and a little bit of sodium, which is good for your skin and good for your muscles and good for your circulation and your health. So that's the predominant offer. So there's a kind of adults only offer, which is called the Spa Dreaming Centre, and then there's a broader offering to the greater site. But in addition to that, there's spa therapy, so there's massage and facials, and there's a number of restaurants, food and beverage outlets,
and retail.
And retail, yeah. So it's on the smaller side for us at the moment, but that will expand.
That'll be the next target.
Yeah, that's right. There's a big opportunity there, but really to enrich the guests' experience when they go home. But we've just launched in December last year, just 6 months ago, our accommodation offer with 10 premium glamping tents, which
how's that going? I mean, how's the demand been?
Really good, really good. They're not really glamping in the true sense because they have their own bathroom, their own shower, and
sure.
It's a heated slab and air conditioning. It's absolutely delightful. So there's 10 of those. They've been 100% booked out from the day we opened them.
Well, I'd say that's pretty successful.
Yeah. So I mean, last week we went into another snap lockdown 2 weeks ago. But for that, it's been really, really good. So the guests can come in, they sleep the night, obviously, and they can bathe all through the night. They have access to food, and they also have great food from our garden that we source our produce from. But also, there's a whole host of wellness activities. So there's a hot cold therapy, there's yoga, Pilates, and Clay Ridge, where there's a body painting and that type of thing.
And who wouldn't want to go to work somewhere where there was all this? I mean, it's just sounds amazing. Yeah. So you mentioned remuneration, and I'd love to hear what you think about that. I would think if you had continued on your EY path, you could be making, huge dollars in the consulting world. Do you feel like what you do now is as rewarding, whether it's financially or in other ways?
Yeah. There's no question of that. It's funny because when I went back to EY 25 years after having left, the senior management of the organisation were people that I started with and worked with as a pup in the early 90s. And they, on a financial scale, far exceeded my earnings. But I think in terms of my own satisfaction and happiness and I guess youthful kind of outlook, I think not that it's a competition or a comparison, but I just know within myself that I'm very satisfied with the choices that I've made, and working here has the potential to do both. So it's good.
Good for you. So I'm interested, Craig, in because you've got that sort of business eye and you know how to build a business and the operations side, and we're coming out of this terrible situation. What do you think the next few years will look like as consumers, come back to embrace wellness? How do you see that affecting your business?
Well, there's a couple of factors there that are important for us. One is international. Well, travel is going to be problematic going forward. In a country such as Australia, we've actually limited our borders because we've been fortunate not to have that many cases of COVID compared to the rest of the world. We will open up at some point, but in the meantime, domestic travel will be significant. And our tourism economy, we spend more at home than we do. We spend at the moment, those that would normally spend, Australians would normally spend outside, are spending it inside Australia.
Right.
And so that's going to be really, really good for us. That will change once the borders open up and they can travel overseas. But
Sure.
The predominant consumer that we target is domestic anyway. We don't have a high international tourism focus within our business. But so that's a fillip for us at the moment, that there is an encouragement of domestic travel. There's also an encouragement to travel within your state, because we have some issues at the moment where we've locked down our state just to try and get on top of an outbreak. And that means that people can't travel freely in and out of the state. So people are traveling within the state more, and they're spending the money that they would have spent either interstate or overseas in our market. So they are looking for things to do that they may not have done before. And that's a great opportunity for us. So that's number one. Number two is this pandemic has focused on people's health and what contributes to people's health. So the virus is a kind of disruption. But if you have a strong immune system and you look after yourself and you exercise and you eat well and you get good sleep and hydrate and nutrition and connect, then you're well placed if you do get it or anything to recover from it. And
sure,
I think
you're healthier to begin with.
That's it. So your baseline to deal with any stress is going to be improved. So I think more and more places such as ours and the wellness industry will flourish because there'll be a heightened awareness to the importance of, I guess, preventative health, which is what wellness is. Instead of having health treated at the other end through
no, wait till you're sick, you take care of yourself first, right? So how often do you take the waters? I mean, is that something that you can do frequently normally at work?
Yeah, I'm a once a week, and Charles always laughs about the fact that it's a KPI, like it should be at least once a week. I was in there before we locked down. I was actually, I go in the hot pool and go in the cold pool. And I was just in the cold pool, just with my head above the water.
Wow.
Charles was doing a tour, and I was just sitting there watching him, and he was, he's always seeking perfection, and he was pointing out something that needed to be changed and needed to be improved. And I was just sitting there below the water like this, just smiling. And then he came around and started laughing. So there he is. He's got his KPI for the week. So yeah, I mean, we certainly encourage our staff to do it. I mean, all of our staff, but particularly the ones that do physical work. The spa therapists, it's a very labour-intensive role, and we encourage them to bathe as often as they can. And as part of the benefits of working at the hot springs, they get to bathe for free.
So now you've got the accommodation, you've got food and beverage, you've got activities like yoga and movement therapies, you have the spa therapies. I mean, is there anything that you hope to add to Peninsula's offerings in the near future?
Sure. Yeah, we've got a permit to build more accommodation in terms of eco lodges.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a plan to build 66 eco lodges and 60 rooms of condominium style, hotel style accommodation. And that will really be the springboard for wellness retreats. Mm. So when we can have more people stay on the site, we will be running retreats. So we have dipped our toe in the water, pardon the pun, into retreats with the 10 glamping tents that we have.
Yeah, you know what? That was such a smart way to do it, with just the 10 to start.
That's it, yeah. And we're going to prove the demand for those other ones as well on a scaled basis. But we also have, we need to have that many people staying on the site, we need to feed them. So we're building a new hospitality building as well. Mm-hmm. So that will, the retreat programs will be much richer. And we're also building some traditional style glamping. So in a canvas mm-hmm. type tent, which doesn't have amenities. So there will be a shared amenity block that you would use. But that's, again, relaxing and connecting in nature. And we also have some other places on the site where people can, and we had these in the plans, but we brought them forward as a result of COVID, where people can go and connect in their own private space. So we call them relaxation spaces, and they are cabana style tents or some domes that you can access for a half day or full day with your family or your work group. So you can maintain your social distancing, and you can work from there if you want, or you could just have a party there with your loved ones. So have these different spaces around the place, which
I'll bet those were very popular.
They have been, yeah, and people have been working from there, and they've been doing their Zoom calls from there. And mm-hmm. In fact, one of the promotions we were doing was around saying, work from the springs. What COVID has kind of proven is that people can work from anywhere, depending on the type of work that they do. Mm-hmm. So you could do your Zoom calls from the hot springs, and we had this kind of imagery in the background of this. But the person being there. So just this week, we sort of did a cute kind of play on that and offered our guests community these images. I've got a few others that represent the Zoom COVID reality. But what we'd like people to do is come down to the hot springs and do it from there.
Right, do it live.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you have people doing Instagram lives and whatnot when you're up and running, which will hopefully be again very soon. I guess there's an advantage, Craig, to you being kind of off in the middle of nowhere, because it sounds like you're going to suck up the rest of your state at the rate you're expanding. So good for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, we've got plenty of space. We've got the 43 acres that we're on this site, and then there's another site to the south, so it's about 70 acres. So it's a big property, and it's about 90 minutes from Melbourne. Mm-hmm. Amazing. So,
well, it sounds like you have quite a lot planned. So I expect Charles won't think you're looking for another job anytime soon. Right?
No, that's this site. We've got some other opportunities on some other sites. So we've got investments in other hot springs. We've got one in New Zealand, in the South Island, just 2 and a bit hours out of Christchurch. And we're looking at some other facilities here in Australia. So, good. Yeah, there's no shortage of work to do, that's for sure.
So in closing, Craig, would you say that you've kind of hit the jackpot when it comes to combining your passions for work and sport and healthy living in the wellness field? It sounds like that's what you think. Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, there's days I pinch myself and think all those risks or decisions that I took, some of them were hasty, some of them were well considered. And when I say they didn't work, they didn't work in terms of what I had planned when I went there, but they worked in terms of I found them enriching and I learned things from them. It's just not, when I went, if I reflect back on each one of them, they didn't pan out as I thought they might. That doesn't mean it was a failure or it didn't develop me. And so when I think about hitting the jackpot, it wasn't just like one day I'd landed on this. It's like this iterative process where I had to learn and develop and grow and find out. And so I think that's a measure of my persistence, but also my willingness to stay true to what I really wanted when I started my career. Because I remember when I started at Ernst & Young, I really wasn't satisfied at all. I couldn't really get excited. This is when I was in finance. I really was miserable. I wanted to just do something else. But I was just being true to myself. My friends were miserable too, but I just sucked it up and kept going, and they got to a point where they could make it work for them. But I wasn't prepared to do that. So,
well, it seems like the important lesson for all of us is that, as you said, you have stepping stones and you learn something from them. They're not a mistake. They help correct the journey, right? And you know, each one you sort of tweak your next step till you get to the right spot if you pay attention and you listen to your inner self, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for joining us, Craig Mitchell, CEO of Peninsula Hot Springs. I hope that you and I can meet again in a hot spring, some nice place when all this is over. But thanks so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, Lisa. And I welcome you down to Australia anytime when you can get here. Once you've, I think you're fully vaccinated, eh?
I am. I'm ready to travel. We need that little seal on our Facebook, like ready to travel. That's me. So hopefully it will be soon. Thanks
Fantastic.
again.
Pleasure. See you.